It's no secret that starting a business is hard. Even if you have an amazing idea, bringing it to life can feel overwhelming. With HubSpot's new entrepreneurship kit, though, you can go from idea to IPO with the help of a company that knows a thing or two about growing better. The all-inclusive kit gives you step-by-step guidance and frameworks to help you crush every stage of starting a business, with tools tailored to help all along the entrepreneurial journey. It's packed with templates for project management, email, and skill development. Wow, that's a lot of templates. There's also a solopreneur guide. It's got freelance pricing worksheets and lots more you can get up and running immediately. And best of all, it's free. With expert guidance and frameworks from HubSpot, starting a business doesn't have to be so hard. So don't wait to start yours. Go to HubSpot.com/ENT to download the guide right now.
Good morning. Today is Sunday, August 25. My name is Juliett Bennett, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Try to imagine, if you will, the sheer amount of content that gets uploaded to any social media platform every day. We're talking posts, images, videos, and more. And now imagine the task of moderating it, trying to figure out what should and should not be allowed on the platform, what violates policies, what doesn't. I think you can all imagine that that's probably a pretty big job. Today, we are going to be talking to Ronaldo Lemos. He is a member of Meta's Oversight Board, and their job is basically to think about content moderation across all of Meta's platforms, including Facebook and Instagram.
So I am Ronaldo Lemos. I am a lawyer based in São Paulo, Brazil. I am specialized in technology policy. I have been working in this particular field for about 24 years. Time flies.
Yeah, I imagine that this field has changed a lot in 24 years, and we'll be talking about that. So I think a lot of people might not be clear as to what the Oversight Board at Meta does or does not do. But it's my understanding that Mark Zuckerberg announced the Oversight Board back in 2018, back when we all called Meta Facebook. And it's a group of experts from around the world, independent but funded by Meta, who make decisions about Meta's content moderation. Is that more or less correct?
Yes, that's correct. I like to emphasize the independent side of it because that's exactly what Meta did. It created a separate entity that actually has the power to making binding decisions in regards to content that is posted on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. And our decisions are actually final. And this particular entity, it also can make recommendations to improve Meta's terms of use and practices. And we have been operating since 2020. So we have already a very long list of cases and recommendations and other things that we do as well. Yeah.
So I wanted to, as an example, just talk about the first case back in January of 2021, mostly because it comes out of Brazil, which is where you are from. And as far as I know, it concerned an Instagram user who posted 8 or so photos of female breasts, which of course Meta's algorithm flagged as nudity and removed. But the issue here was that it wasn't sexual in nature. It was actually about breast cancer awareness. So Meta's algorithms got rid of these posts, but the Oversight Board actually disagreed with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because our very first case had to do with automation. So for me, this is a very interesting topic because, of course, I work with it very closely in my professional day-to-day basis. But at that time, it was not obvious what would be the role of the Oversight Board in regards to automation. And I like very much that right from the outset, we basically took that case and we established that we would be capable of talking about algorithms, how Meta basically classified content, how content was enforced automatically through algorithms. And I think this was probably unexpectedly the perfect case to start with.
Right.
Because it was the moment in which we established our jurisdiction over Meta. We established also our independence because when we took the case, Meta basically said, oh, this was a moderation mistake. We just reinstated the content online, so you don't have to take the case. And we said, no, we do have to take the case because it's
Right,
a very
right.
interesting one. And we moved forward. And I think that was our, inaugural moment in which we basically established our independence, the fact that we are definitely capable of talking about automation and everything that came after that. So that was a good moment. And for me, I'm particularly happy because it was a case from Brazil, as you said.
Mm-hmm. And is that typically what has happened since when there's a disagreement between the board and Meta? You're like, hey, we're independent. We're going to make our own decisions. It's cool that you might reinstate that content or not reinstate that content, but actually there's a deeper issue here.
Yes, that has been the way that we operate. We definitely think our independence is crucial. And it's important because the way that the Oversight Board was designed was pretty much to protect that independence, right? So, for instance, I cannot be fired by Meta. I have a term in which I can serve. We have actually a long runway of funds that are already deposited in a trust that is independent from Meta and it's irrevocable. So all that basically helps us to make decisions that do not have to take into account profit maximization or any other sorts of conflicts that might happen when those decisions are actually taken internally inside the company. And this is quite unique because that's not the rule in Silicon Valley. Usually decisions are made by, the same managers that are concerned with the profits from the quarter or anything like that. And I think this decision that Meta made to basically create a separate entity with all these protections is actually a good one. So that allows us to actually speak up to Meta and actually disagree with Meta and make decisions that Meta not necessarily like, but they are bound by contract to actually implement. And in our track record, our decisions, 100% of them have been implemented. And in regards to the recommendations, Meta is not bound to implement them. They're not binding, but they must respond publicly. And of course, we keep tabs on what recommendations Meta implement or not. And we have an above 85% average of recommendations that have also been implemented. So I would say that that is a pretty good level as well.
And just to clarify for some of our listeners here, you only make recommendations concerning content moderation. So what should not be on the platform, what kind of rules dictating what can be posted, what isn't allowed. That's very strictly your purview.
Yes, but it goes a little beyond that in the sense that we also analyze Meta's practices by means of something else that we do that are called policy advisory opinions, PAOs. So we take something that relates as a sort of a broader practice from the company and we analyze those. So just to give you an example, there is the X-Check case in which the Wall Street Journal basically published that Meta had a VIP list, a list of individuals that had a special treatment on the part of their moderation. And we as a board took that case and basically we provided guidelines of how Meta should actually change their course in the way they were treating these VIPs. So I think that was, about content moderation, of course, but it speaks to a broader company practice that was actually improved because of our advice.
Okay, I see. And then this content moderation pertains to Facebook, Instagram, Threads.
Yes.
Do you ever have to deal with anything on WhatsApp or even perhaps more strangely, what they're doing in the metaverse on like Horizon Worlds or anything like that?
No, not now. Where we follow those two, apps very closely, of course. We have participated in briefings about the metaverse, like Horizon, and we have also looked at, WhatsApp from the outside. But because WhatsApp is a sort of messaging system, like a private messaging thing, it's not really about publishing content.
Mm-hmm.
So it's outside of the jurisdiction of the Oversight Board. And the metaverse, maybe in the future, we will have jurisdiction over that as well. Just like with Threads, right? So when Threads was launched, we didn't have the jurisdiction over it. But a couple of months later, we actually negotiated with Meta, and now we are capable of taking cases from Threads as well. So as the company diversifies, I think it's natural that the Oversight Board will also expand its jurisdiction to actually, follow that.
The last time I was in Horizon Worlds, which I believe I only visited once, I noticed it was a lot of children yelling at me.
Oh.
So I can definitely see how that could in the future be something that you would oversee.
Yes.
So, obviously, we've had a lot of changes since the Meta Oversight Board started taking cases. And I think most significantly, perhaps those changes are in AI. We used to not talk about AI, and now it is all anybody talks about in the tech space, it seems. Just the ability to generate audio, video, images, pretty much anything you want at the drop of a hat is, I assume, a bit startling if you're somebody who is thinking a lot about content moderation. For you and the board, what are some of the challenges you're working with or some of the cases you're working with right now concerning AI?
Yeah, as you say, everything has changed in this past 4 years, right? So AI is now, I think, something that is accessible for a lot of people. We see it being employed in elections all over the world. We see the debate about deep fakes. And of course, we are following that. We have already had a couple of cases having to do with AI. So one is an important one involving President Biden. And basically, it's a case in which Biden appears to be touching his granddaughter inappropriately because the video was actually manipulated. It was not really a deep fake. It was more like a cheap fake because they didn't use AI. They just used some editing tools in order to make that look like it. But that was actually one of the points that we addressed. Like, it doesn't matter if you use a very sophisticated technology or if you're just using basic editing tools. If you're doing that, and that was our decision, you have to label that content, right? So our recommendation to Meta was that they should label manipulated media. The other thing we did was actually the Meta terms of use. They used to say that you should not use AI to make people say something that they didn't say, but they didn't have anything about doing something that you didn't do. So we basically said, no, we live in a world in which it's not only about voice manipulation, it's about making people appear to be doing something that they didn't do. So they had to update that as well. And it's interesting because our labeling decision, it was actually impactful because we then saw other players as well implementing the same provision, including, for instance, OpenAI. And they basically committed also to include a label in manipulated content. In Meta, it's important to say, right after we made that decision, they came the other day and basically they said, oh, we are going to abide by this decision that the Oversight Board did. And they made a commitment to label AI content on the platform. And I think that's a very positive thing. And I think it was great for us to take that case before the US elections and, at a very early time, because I think it actually had an impact over the whole industry, if you think about it.
Right. And this labeling pertains to both still images as well as video, audio, basically any type of content in which AI was used. In this particular case with the video of Joe Biden, would that be labeled with made with AI, or would it have some other sort of label to indicate that it was manipulated in some way?
I don't know exactly what Meta will say, and it's actually up to Meta to decide how they're going to be labeling this. What I saw from the company is their commitment to do so, but I don't know the specifics about the language they will be using or what kind of specific interstices or whatever that they're going to apply over the video. But of course, we'll be looking for how they implement that. And if there is any adjustment, I'm sure we'll be able to do that in a future case.
One thing I'm curious about, and I'm curious about this just because of events that occurred this week, I believe. I think because we all know how prevalent AI is, there's a lot of mistrust when it comes to the content that we're consuming online. I think particularly in the United States, because we've got what I would call a contentious election coming up. And obviously there was concerns about interference on social media with elections in the past. I think there's a lot of mistrust around the content that we're seeing because, as we know, anything could potentially be AI. I think we've all been fooled by an AI image in the last year or so. But I was reading that recently, Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president here in the United States, he accused Kamala Harris of using AI to making it look like she had more people at an event than she really did. Now, it's since been proven that that was a real image, I believe. Do you think there'll be any sort of way to differentiate between, okay, yes, this was AI, but then to also have clarification around, no, this isn't AI? Or is that adding to the confusion where people just, they mistrust everything and they aren't sure? Or what do you think will happen there?
This is the key thing when we discuss about AI, right? So we human beings, we generally trust video. So until now, you basically, when you see a video, it feels to us like a proof that something actually happened. Mm-hmm. You can even say, oh, I saw the video, right. It happened. But the thing is, right now, that is not necessarily true anymore, right? Because you have all these very powerful tools and devices that you can use to recreate videos or edit or transform them in multiple ways. So there is an emerging distrust in video. Personally, and this is my personal view, I really think that we should provide more information and not less. So that's why I think the labeling effort is extremely important, because when you let people know that a certain video was manipulated, you actually let people decide how they will take the value of that particular video, right? If they will trust in the video, if they will basically say, oh, this is AI and has been manipulated and so on. Because that's it. I think like people should be central for that. So it's not about removing everything that has been manipulated by AI. That was actually something that we said in our case about Joe Biden. We basically said it's better that you label the video than you take it down. So our decision was basically to let the video up and basically just let people know that that was a manipulated piece of content, right? So that for me is preferable than simply just like taking down everything. But just to give you an example how things get complicated, in a past election cycle we had here in Brazil, a politician was caught in a sort of a expose, a sexual situation and everything. And then he used AI as a sort of an alibi, He basically said, no, that was not me. That was AI. I never did this, So we're definitely entering in this world in which we will have to learn new skills about how we approach videos, because it's no longer the case that we can trust any video that we see.
Right. And that kind of leads me to my next question. I think we have seen some images of public figures, politicians, celebrities manipulated with AI. And in some cases, they're silly and they seem harmless. I believe I saw an image of Snoop Dogg as though he were Lara Croft from Tomb Raider the other day. I saw it. I sort of chuckled. I moved on. But the Oversight Board actually had to consider this recently, right, with images of two women who were public figures. I think you didn't say who they were, but I think we all know one is America's biggest pop star. And these were manipulated images that were non-consensual, sort of nude sexual imagery. And that's obviously not harmless. What are some of the decisions you are making or weighing with those?
Yeah, and that's the other side of the issue, right? A very dark side, actually, because you can use these tools to produce sexual images basically about anyone. So we have seen this happening, for instance, in Brazil, in schools, and, some colleagues produce images of other colleagues and so on. And usually the victims are mostly female. And it's very hard. There has been even situations, for instance, in Pakistan, in which a 18-year-old woman was killed by her dad and her uncle because they created an image of her with a man. And, in that particular circumstance, the family, became violent and so on. So this is really dangerous and this is really concerning. And as you mentioned, we already had a case about that involving two celebrities, one in the United States and the other one in India. And it was actually interesting how they were treated differently. So the one in the US, all the images had been included in Meta's database for automated removal. So if you try to post that particular image, it would be taken down immediately. In the Indian case, even though the woman was a celebrity, the image had not been included in the database. So it was basically up and you could actually see it and access it and share it. And basically our decision was, of course, to take that down. And basically what we said was that Meta should change how they approach this particular type of thing. So right now, before our decision, Meta was approaching this as a sort of a bullying case. So even their terms of use, they were talking about Photoshop sexual images,
Okay.
So Photoshop is a technology of decades ago. So you could already see that this was very much outdated. So it was this idea that we were photoshopping images to create a sexual connotation, and that was a violation of their bullying terms of use. And what we said is, no, this should be a violation of adult sexual exploitation. It must be taken down immediately, and it must be included in the database so that people that basically try to post it again, they won't be able to do that. And we actually asked Meta why they didn't include the Indian celebrity. And what they said is that they were basically including images in the database based on news reports.
Oh.
And actually, we were very concerned with that answer because this is something that doesn't happen only with celebrities. It happens, with schoolgirls, and anyone might be a victim of that. So we made all these suggestions to Meta to improve their terms of use, to improve their practices, so that if someone is victimized by something like this, they don't have to, do much, and the platform basically takes action immediately about it. So I think these cases were very important. And of course, in this particular type of thing, labeling is completely useless. It's not about labeling. It doesn't matter if you label it or not, because this now is a violation of something else. It's a violation of adult sexual exploitation. And one last thing, which is important to mention, Meta's terms of use, they were basically talking about derogatory images. And we also changed that into non-consensual images so that it basically applies to everyone. If it's non-consensual, doesn't matter if it's derogatory or not, it must be removed, included in the database, so that no one is a victim of this any longer.
Right. And, I live in California, where Meta is, of course, headquartered. And here they call that revenge porn. If it's a real image that someone has of someone else and they share it non-consensually, that's illegal. And so it feels like there is potentially some catching up to do because, I think it is just as harmful to send a real image as it is to fabricate an image. Like the intention is still the same. It is to humiliate and bully and exploit someone. It just seems like maybe we haven't quite caught up to how quickly people can make these images.
Yeah, and just as a sort of a quick segue to that, the Brazilian law is the same. And actually, I was involved in building Brazil's law for the internet. That law was passed in 2014, and it basically says that revenge porn must be taken down immediately by any sort of platform in which it appears. And it doesn't matter if the revenge porn is actually a film that you created from reality or something that you created on your computer using AI. The law makes no distinction. So as you mentioned, like in many jurisdictions, this is already part of the law. But the problem, and this is why the Oversight Board is important is that this is a global problem, right? So in
Right.
many other jurisdictions, including the United States, this is not illegal or there's no specific provision addressing revenge porn. So many countries in the world, victims of this have no recourse. And that's why we look to these issues as a sort of a global problem. And that's why I think having a board like this actually help to address this.
Mm-hmm. I did want to talk to you about the laws that you helped draft in Brazil. I saw that they, were passed in 2014. I also saw that you started working on them in 2009.
2007, to be precise.
Oh, 2007, even earlier. So obviously this is complicated. It's not like you just say, hey, here's my idea and it happens. And we have a lot of bureaucracy here as well, but what goes into drafting a law like this as to how the internet, which is so wild and untamed, and you've got all sorts of people doing all sorts of things, arguing that this is their free speech. What goes into the years-long process of trying to determine, yes, this is how the internet should be used safely, equitably, et cetera?
Yeah, well, in our case in Brazil, my lesson was democracy works, but it takes a long time. You have to be really persistent. And as you can imagine, 7 years is a long time, but you have to keep on track. If you want to make something happen, that's how you do. One thing that I find special about the Brazilian law is the fact that it was drafted as a sort of a collaborative project. It was created through a public consultation online in which basically we asked people to provide the inputs about what an internet law should look like. So it was beautiful because the law was built by, a very large number of people who looked into the final text and said, oh, I helped drafting that, I'm part of it. So even now, 10 years later, this actually is a pretty sophisticated law, not because of me, but because of the amount of people that actually came together and helped draft the final piece of legislation. So I think this is a lesson for us all. When we talk about technology, when we talk about everything that has to do with AI, this has to do with everyone. So the more people that you listen, the more people that can actually participate in building the law, the better the outcome will be, the more sophisticated it will be, the more representative it will be. So that was something that I still care very dearly. So now people are talking about regulating AI in Brazil. And what I am doing is basically proposing the same thing, to create a public consultation and let people say what they think about how we should approach AI. So as I mentioned, the more participation you get, the best result you get as well.
Right. Are there some learnings that you've been able to take from seeing this legislation be in Brazil for a decade that you think, hey, I think Meta should implement this, or globally, I think other social media platforms or internet service providers or whoever should implement this?
Yeah, the participatory thing, I think it's something that Meta and other companies actually noted, but especially Meta, they do these things that are called community forums. So from time to time, we as Oversight Board members, we are invited to participate in those as a sort of observers. So what they do is they create these regional groups in which they invite all types of stakeholders, civil society members, scientific community members, and so on, to see what is their take in regards to how their community values should be in that particular region. I think this is a very healthy practice. I think AI companies are starting to do the same. I've just talked with people from different companies 2 weeks ago, and they basically said that they are on this constitutional moment for AI, in which they are starting to build these forums to basically understand what should be the guardrails of AI in different regions. And actually, this is very important for me because definitely in AI or in social media, there is no one size fits all. You have to be able to understand the nuances and the particularities of different regions when you make these decisions. And that's why I think, again, an institution like the Oversight Board is important and unique because our perspective is precisely to look at the bigger picture and to understand the differences that sometimes a company that is worried about profits in each quarter won't have the time or the skills or even the absence of conflicts to do. So that's why I think like a model like ours is actually important, maybe even for AI. I wouldn't be surprised if AI companies, including Meta, would, in a moment like adopt something similar to the Oversight Board to address this constitutional problem of AI as well.
Mm-hmm. And you think this would be, in Meta's case, a completely different oversight board that just focused on AI?
I wouldn't say that that would be necessary. I actually think that the Oversight Board, as it is, could actually do that constitutional side for AI. So AI companies, they call this division between rules and behavior, right? So rules is this constitutional part of models that basically determine what a model can do or cannot do. And behavior is basically how the model responds to prompts and everything that you basically input on it. And right now, what I see is that most AI companies are basically completely lost on the side of rules. They don't know what to do. They're just realizing the complexity of the world and everything like that. And what we do at the Oversight Board is basically that. We do the rules part, Our expertise is to basically look into the world, different jurisdictions and regions, and see how they are applied to speech, to technology, to tax services, and so on. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if the Oversight Board, as we are right now, become, more and more important also in the context of AI.
Mm-hmm. Are there some things that you predict you're going to be seeing a lot of soon? I think, some of the predictions we've already talked about. People said, people are going to use AI to create images of things that didn't happen. They're going to use AI to create deepfakes. I personally think we're going to have a lot of issues concerning copyright law. Yes, great. You can make an AI painting of a cat, but where did the AI learn how to make that painting? Did it scrape a copyrighted piece of art from another artist? What are some of the things that you think are going to be coming up a lot in the near future?
Yeah, copyright is definitely one of them. It's already happening. You see a lot of lawsuits emerging against AI companies right now. But one thing that I would see as well, and I would dare to predict, is that AI is going to be more and more used for content moderation. So the future of content moderation will be this human-machine thing, and the machine will be more and more responsible for filtering content, taking down content, making content decisions, which might be good because right now, for instance, Meta and other companies, they employ a lot of people that are basically tasked with keep watching everything that goes on in social media. In the future, machines, not only in the future, but now, machines are taking up that role increasingly. So the question that makes is, who watches the watchman, right? Who will supervise the AI structure, the AI guidelines in order to moderate content? So again, I think AI alone is a bad thing. I don't think AI will be able to take over content moderation. Actually, that would be a very undesirable future for me, one in which our AI overlords basically deal with everything that we can say or not. I actually don't like that at all. So I would say that this duality between AI and a body like the Oversight Board or human beings in the loop will be extremely important for the future of content, especially because when you deal with content moderation, you're dealing with a lot of nuance, right? So, for instance, the word Taliban, it might be news coverage, or it might be something that is actually provoking incitement or incitement against women. It depends a lot on the context that you see certain words to see if they are just newsworthy or It's something that is actually part of an incitement campaign. And I think AI will be getting better and better in reading context, but we will always have to have the human in the loop for basically fine-tuning the system and also creating these guardrails, these rules, this constitutional part of AI, which we should never delegate to machines alone.
Right. And I think we've already seen what happens when you delegate to machines. You have posts that get removed that shouldn't be removed. With any machine, with any algorithm, we teach that machine. So these machines come with the bias that we come with, and you need somebody to constantly be monitoring that. But at the same time, I do think that I see a practical need to move some of this away from people. I think we've all read the reports about content moderators who actually get really burned out and in some cases traumatized because they have to observe so much hatred and images. I think there was an article where somebody who was a content moderator was just really upset by how much animal cruelty they had to look at in a day. Mm-hmm. Do you see sort of a way that maybe AI can take some of that off of people as long as there are these guardrails? Or do you think humans will still have to look at a lot of this stuff?
No, I think AI will play a very important role in content moderation, and definitely it will make the task for human beings that can be horrible, as you just described, a little bit lighter, So this is a good thing. I think like AI is here to stay in content moderation. The challenge is precisely to find the right balance between machines and humans. And not only that, is to have an oversight on AI itself, because it's not that we should, use AI to replace humans in content moderation. I think we can replace human work in a great extent for doing that, but we definitely have to keep an eye about the guardrails and understand how AI is behaving, what are the rules, what are the contexts for each region. It's the same problem that every other AI company is facing right now. How will your model behave if you are in India, in South Africa, in Brazil, if you're in Saudi Arabia, if you are in the United States? These types of things, they are extremely important. And of course, at the Oversight Board, our number one commitment is with freedom of speech. So if you look at our decisions, it's basically the main drive and guideline is protecting freedom of speech as much as we can, right? So this is what we do. And we have to keep AI on the line as well for that, because sometimes, and we have seen this happening, there are cases of over-enforcement. And I'll give you an example involving Meta. In the Israel-Palestine conflict, Meta basically changed their weights in regards to certain terms that are problematic. So they made the weights more sensitive for automated moderation. And as a result, there was an over-enforcement of moderation in Israel and Gaza in regards to the conflict, in which a lot of content was being removed, even though they were completely permissible within the boundaries of the terms of use. So that type of thing can happen, and actually I'm very glad that we took like 4 cases right away in order to address that particular issue. And we basically immediately detected that there was a case of over-moderation. And then we addressed that. So as I said, our main goal, our main drive is protect freedom of speech as much as possible. And basically, AI has to be part of that job, because if AI is not properly tuned, it can basically lead to over-enforcement.
And just to put this in perspective for our listeners, because every day I see someone on Instagram or Facebook saying, my post got removed and it was actually really benign, but I used this word and it keeps getting deleted and I don't get it. How much content is there, if on a daily basis that gets posted across these multiple platforms that has to be sifted through every single day? What are some of the challenges the average social media user who's just on there to connect with their friends and wish grandma happy birthday would not know, just being an average user?
Well, I don't have the numbers specifically about that, but as you can imagine, this is an extremely large amount of content, right? So that's why automated moderation is being deployed, everywhere. It's not only about Meta, but every other company now relies on automated moderation. The problem is that automated moderation can fail.
Right.
Very first case we had in Brazil is an example of that. And at that moment, I think automated moderation was actually employed in a much smaller scale than it is right now. So basically, right now, there are a lot of cases in which a particular piece of content is decided by an algorithm whether it should stay up or not. And the case is automatically closed from the side of Meta. So this is something that we have been addressing recently, this problem of the auto closing of cases, because it's just as you described. Someone posts something that is apparently very benign, and some algorithm looks into it and takes it down, and the case closes. And so what do?
Right.
We are looking into that. We are providing recommendations for Meta in this regard, because, of course, as we said, automated moderation might have its advantages, but of course it has its downside as well, and we have to be careful about that.
Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss that we haven't discussed yet?
I think we covered quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Talk about the present and the future. It's very hard to predict the future these days, but my view is I see a lot of people, especially from the AI sector, calling for the creation of a sort of an international atomic energy agency for AI, in which governments would come together and create this international organization that would regulate AI. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think in the world we live today, this will actually be very hard. And that's why I think models like the Oversight Board might actually be the answer. It might be very hard for states coming together to create a new agency, but it actually might be quite sensible to see companies coming together and basically creating a regulatory body that is binding, independent, and enforceable, doing the work that they actually are not capable of doing inside the companies, either because of conflicts or because of they simply not having the skills. So that's my final point. Like maybe the model of the Oversight Board might be an important one to look at when you talk about the international regulation of AI.
Ronaldo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Juliett. I was very happy to be on the show.
And thank you for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor today is Robert Hartwig, and our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a lot more tech and business coverage in our newsletter, so if you're not subscribed, go get yourself signed up at thehustle.co/email, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Hey everybody, I've been listening to this awesome podcast lately called Entrepreneurs on Fire. It's hosted by John Lee Dumas, and it's available right now on the HubSpot Podcast Network. Entrepreneurs on Fire stokes inspiration and shares strategies to fire up your entrepreneurial journey and create the life that you've always dreamed of. It offers lots of energy, value, consistency, and it's for anybody who wants to learn more about entrepreneurship. It's super fast-paced and packed with valuable stories about entrepreneurs, their aha moments, their failures, and everything to what's working for them today. Recently, he had on this guest, Ashley Stahl, who talked all about her job at the Pentagon and how she evolved into becoming a top 100 TEDx speaker. She talks about evolving your brand from the ground up, leaning into the skills that you already have to build your brand, and also creating virality. It's a great listen. You should check it out. And you can listen to Entrepreneurs on Fire wherever you get your podcasts.